Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a general, not a scholar, not even a eunuch with keys to the palace gates. You're a concubine, male, beautiful, and inconvenient. You weren't born to silk, but you wear it now, because someone with power decided you looked pleasing in it. You walk on lacquered floors that echo with history and rumour. Your smile rehearsed, your posture perfected, your silence more important than your voice. You are watched, weighed, controlled. No one tells you everything, but everyone expects you to know your place, and to stay there. Before the gates close behind you for good, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is there. I find it strangely comforting to know who's out there, keeping these stories alive. And if you'd like early access to more of these grim history stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You are nobody, just another face in a crowd of pretty boys, standing shirtless and silent in the courtyard of a magistrate's estate. The morning air is thin and colourless, a pale dust clinging to your skin and lips. You don't know most of the others by name, though you've seen them before, fetching water, sweeping temple steps, selling lotus sweets beside the river in late summer. You are not friends, you are competitors. You don't speak, none of you do. You've been told not to, and more importantly, you've seen what happens to those who disobey. One boy coughed once softly, as the sun reached the upper railings. He's not here anymore. You wait and wait. The silence is not peaceful. It hums like a mosquito in the ear, agitated, defensive, hungry. A eunuch with stiff posture and a fan of woven reeds stands just inside the painted gate, checking names from a scroll none of you were permitted to read. The man beside him wears dark blue robes, embroidered with thread, that shimmers when he moves. He never makes eye contact. He does not need to. Instead, he studies the group with a kind of practiced indifference, his gaze sliding over chests, jaws, eyelashes, the slope of your shoulders. You feel yourself being looked through, not at. When your turn comes, it's without ceremony. A gesture, a flick of the hand. You're motioned forward and told to stand straight. Another eunuch steps in with a strip of silk and wraps it around your eyes, not to blind you, but to test something. He pulls it taut, then lets it fall, scribbles something onto a small parchment, and walks away. No one explains what it means. You are not asked your name. No one inquires after your family, or your education, or whether you know how to write poetry in the autumn style. They don't care what you've learned, only what you are, or rather, what you look like. The ones not chosen are dismissed without cruelty, but also without acknowledgement. The gate opens again, and they are told to leave. Not a word is spoken to them. They simply vanish, returning to whatever dull corners they came from, perhaps to be scouted again next season. Or not. There are always more. You remain. A cloth bundle is placed into your hands, a fresh tunic, coarsely dyed, and a pair of sandals that don't quite fit. You're given 5 minutes to change. A basin of water is passed around. No soap, no towel, just enough to wipe your face. The cart arrives just after midday. It's plain, wooden, and roofed with red tiles to give the illusion of honour. It does not succeed. One by one, the selected are led inside. No shackles, no ropes. The door remains open, but you all know it might as well be locked. You sit on the bench lining the cart wall, hands in your lap, knees pressed together, as you've seen palace servants do when waiting in the wings. The eunuchs speak only to each other now, using clipped phrases full of shorthand and nicknames. One refers to you collectively as peonies. Another calls you fruit. It is not meant kindly. The cart smells of bamboo oil, dust, and something vaguely sweet, like overripe persimmons beginning to rot. You're told not to speak. That rule is easy enough to follow. No one here wants to form alliances just yet. There's too much at stake. Instead, you study your reflection in the polished bronze plate mounted across from you. It's not a mirror, not truly, but it's the closest thing to clarity you'll have for a long while. Your face looks thinner than you remembered, your eyes darker. You try to sit straighter, to soften your expression, to look more like someone who belongs wherever you're being taken. The journey is long, but not unbearable. The cart sways gently with the turns, and the wooden wheels clatter rhythmically against the stone road. You pass fields, villages, and at least one monastery, with wind chimes hanging like silver feathers from its eaves. A few local children wave as you pass. One throws a pebble. The eunuch riding up front does not react. You realise slowly that the world outside is not your concern anymore. It belongs to people with different futures, people with choices. You don't look out the window again. Eventually, the sun begins to dip, casting the interior of the cart in a soft orange haze. The boy sitting across from you, delicate-faced with a faint scar on his chin, finally shifts and speaks in a whisper. "Do you think we'll see the Emperor?" he asks, not quite looking at you. You don't answer, neither does anyone else. The silence feels less like obedience now, and more like superstition. To speak of the Emperor is to tempt the air. You've all heard the stories of concubines chosen, discarded, and never seen again. Of boys turned into ghosts inside walls so wide they echo even when no one is there. When the gates come into view, it doesn't feel like an arrival, more like a narrowing. The walls of the palace stretch upward like cliffs, their vermilion paint cracked and flaking in places despite the grandeur. You've never seen anything so large that felt so utterly closed. Two soldiers in ceremonial armour open the outer doors, and the cart rolls forward, slower now, as if even the horses understand the weight of where you're going. A bell tolls somewhere, deep, low and deliberate. It is not welcoming. It is a reminder that here every breath is measured. The cart halts inside a walled courtyard, tiled in green-glazed bricks, the air still warm from the day's heat, but already turning dry and sharp at the edges. The doors open, and for a moment, no one moves. Then a sharp clap, 2 fingers against a lacquered baton, and you are herded out, one by one, like livestock that's been taught to bow. You're not spoken to, just gestured at, directed through an open doorway, too small for ceremony, and far too wide for comfort. The walls are high and bare, no banners, no names, just shadow. Inside, the world becomes quieter in a different way. The sounds are still there, footsteps, the distant clang of bronze bells, the soft drag of fabric, but they come through thick walls and tighter corridors, like voices filtered through silk. You're led through 3 chambers, each more colourless than the last, until you reach the bathhouse. A low, rectangular space with steam that clings to your face and makes the air taste like old stone and sandalwood. No one tells you what to do, but the eunuchs waiting at the edge of the room are already holding brushes. Your robe is taken, folded and gone in one breath. You stand there, bare and small beneath the high ceiling beams, trying not to shiver. The others avoid your gaze. That feels right. You try not to look at them either, even when one whimpers as cold water is poured over his head without warning. You expect to be asked questions. You aren't. Instead, you're seized gently by the wrists and guided to a platform where you're scrubbed by 3 older men with long-handled bristle brushes. Their faces unreadable. They wash you as if you're a tool that's been left out in the rain. Hair is shaved, not just trimmed, but sheared close to the scalp, then scraped smooth with a blade dipped in camellia oil. Even your eyebrows are thinned, fingernails cut, skin checked for blemishes, scars, moles, anything that might interrupt the illusion of perfection. A eunuch clicks his tongue at a faint birthmark on your back, then marks something in a little red ledger. You feel the loss of your body long before you're clothed again. It isn't pain exactly, more like the soft, persistent ache of erasure, as if someone is writing over you, stroke by stroke. You're led to a narrow dormitory with 10 identical beds and a thin strip of linen embroidered with a single character above each one. You're pointed toward the one marked with your new name, a name you've never heard before and don't like the sound of. It is soft, indistinct, a name made to be forgotten easily. You repeat it in your mind until it starts to sound like someone else entirely. You lie down and stare at the ceiling, where a mural of cranes and pine trees arcs across the plaster. It's beautifully painted, though parts are flaking near the corner beam. Someone once cared enough to put it there. Someone once thought it mattered what you looked up at while falling asleep in a strange bed, with someone else's name stitched into the pillow. You wonder if this is what it feels like to be blessed, to be chosen, to be sculpted into something smooth and desirable and untethered from the dirt you came from. Or maybe this is the other thing, the darker thing. The burial you give to a person while their body is still warm. A soft, slow burial, beneath incense smoke and layered fabrics and titles that aren't real. Each morning begins the same, incense smoke curling into your lungs before your robe even touches your shoulders. The scent seeps in before you're fully awake, sweet and spiced, something between sandalwood and dried orange peel. It comes from the brazier near the entrance of the dormitory hall, where a junior attendant lights it just before the bells toll. You never see him. You only know he's been there by the faint warmth left behind, the trail of smoke, and the way it settles over your skin like dust. The scent clings all day. It weaves into the fibres of your robe, your hair, the crease of your throat. Eventually, you stop noticing it at all, but it's still there, marking you, branding you. You rise before the sun crests the garden wall. You're expected to be upright and composed by the second bell. Face washed, teeth scraped with salt, robe fastened neatly with the sash knotted in the prescribed style. You do this not out of eagerness, but because falling behind means drawing attention, and attention is dangerous currency here. In the palace, effort must look effortless. Precision must feel innate. You are not supposed to appear as though you're trying, only as though you were born perfect. After dressing, you are led through the morning rituals, calligraphy practice to refine your wrist, vocal exercises to soften your tone, tea pouring drills to train your wrists to move in graceful arcs. The brush must never drag, the voice must never strain, the teacup must not clink against the tray. You are corrected with small sighs and nearly invisible frowns. A raised eyebrow can ruin your morning. A clipped note in your behaviour log can shadow your week. You memorise every look, every mood, every unspoken rule. When you walk, you're not to swing your arms. When you sit, your ankles must remain crossed, but not tightly. When you laugh, it must never be too loud. When you cry, if you cry, it must be from one eye only, and never in front of the wrong people. You are taught how to move through space as though you are part of it, not distinct from it. You are a decoration, not a presence. A thread in a larger tapestry. Replaceable. Lovely. Quiet. The robes you wear during training are pale and neutral. Celadon, pearl grey, faded lavender, so as not to distract from the lines of your body. Not lines of strength, but lines of grace. One of the older attendants, a former performer now too stiff in the joints to serve, shows you how to hold a pose for hours without shifting your weight. Stillness is power, he murmurs once, adjusting the angle of your chin with two knuckles. Stillness is safety. You believe him. You are not taught to dance, not formally, but your daily movements are dance all the same, ritualized, contained, slow enough that you forget what walking felt like. Before you counted your steps in even numbers, you glide across lacquered floors, bow at predetermined intervals, and lower yourself into seated positions with rehearsed humility. Everything has a pace. Everything has a purpose, and none of it belongs to you. Meals arrive on silent trays carried by silent hands. You do not thank them. They do not acknowledge you. The food is light, elegant, and meant to maintain your figure rather than satisfy your hunger. Pickled plums, slivers of steamed yam, rice strained 3 times until it no longer sticks to itself. You are praised indirectly for your posture at mealtime, for how little noise your chopsticks make, for how slowly you chew. Praise never comes in the form of words, only in smaller punishments withheld. A nod, a second glance, a tray not taken away before you finish. The mirrors are not mirrors, not really. They're polished bronze discs mounted on lacquered frames, slightly convex, slightly tarnished. They do not show you clearly. You learn to judge your appearance by silhouette, by tone, by the way a shadow falls across your cheekbone. Every morning, a different feature is emphasized. The shape of your jaw, the slant of your brow, the way your lips look when painted with crushed hibiscus. You are not allowed to choose how you look, but you are expected to know how you appear to others. This is the distinction. This is the trap. Your hair grows back slowly. When it's long enough to shape, a eunuch takes a pair of shears to it with ceremonial care, cutting it into a style favoured during the reign of the current consort. You don't recognise yourself in the mirror afterward, but no one asks if you do. You are not meant to resemble yourself. You are meant to resemble an ideal, timeless, flattering, unthreatening, a balance of youth and submission. Conversation is permitted during designated periods, always within earshot of at least one senior attendant. Most discussions are shallow, comments about weather, colour, perfume. If anyone says anything truly personal, it is coded, and it is brief. One boy refers to his mother only as the peach tree behind the stable. Another mentions the river he used to walk beside but cannot name the town. You say little. You listen often. It is safer to collect information than to distribute it. Some of the others compete openly, flattering attendants or rehearsing extra lines of poetry in hopes of being noticed. You do not. You've seen how quickly those efforts curdle. A compliment from the wrong person can invite scrutiny. A favour granted today may demand repayment tomorrow. You keep your head bowed, but not too low. You speak when spoken to, but not too eagerly. You smile only when others do first. It is not humility, it is camouflage. The garden is the only place that doesn't smell like incense. You are allowed there for 20 minutes a day under supervision, always in pairs, never alone. The plum trees are pruned into perfect domes, their blossoms swept up before they touch the path. You walk slowly, counting your steps, pretending not to notice the guards. Just beyond the hedge, the koi pond is clean but lifeless. The fish are too slow to break the surface. You envy them. Your hands are softened with ointment each night. Your eyebrows are shaped every other day. Your lips are exfoliated with sugar and rice wine. You are told it is a privilege. You are told many things. That service is sacred, that beauty is discipline, that your body is no longer your own, but belongs to the palace. And if the palace wishes to preserve it, it will. If not, it will not. These are not threats, just truths, stated plainly. You learn to nod without feeling. Once, during posture training, your leg cramps mid-bow and you stumble. The room goes silent. The eunuch instructor does not scold you. He simply steps closer, adjusts your robe, and whispers, "Next time, let the pain in first." Then it won't surprise you. You don't fall again. You begin to forget what your voice used to sound like when it wasn't shaped by lesson or fear. You no longer wake with your own name in your head. You begin to anticipate commands before they're given, gestures before they're made. You exist slightly ahead of yourself, like a shadow that moves before the body. You forget to question this. You stop wondering when it happened. It's easier that way. Sometimes after the final bell, you lie in bed with your eyes open and listen to the sound of nothing. Not silence, never that, but the quiet rustle of silk shifting on bed sheets, the faint scrape of a sandal against the floor, the breathing of others who are just as afraid of dreaming too freely. You think of speaking, then don't. You trace the embroidered pattern on your sleeve instead. Someone else chose that pattern. You've never asked who. You learn how to survive without ever appearing to try. The eunuchs do not blink. You begin to feel that neither should you. Their presence becomes constant, not loud or theatrical, but complete, like a pressure in the air. They glide through the palace corridors, in pairs or alone, robes whispering at their ankles, always arriving before anyone expects them. You don't hear their steps, you just feel the shift in the room when they enter. A drop in temperature, a tension in the shoulders, a silence within the silence. You never hear them cough or laugh or clear their throats. They breathe, of course, but even that seems deliberate. They are not uniform in appearance. Some are old and hunched, with faces like creased paper and long yellow nails. Others are young and taut, their eyes bright with something sharp and fast and hungry. All of them carry scrolls or fans or small writing boards. You learn quickly that what they carry is a measure of their power. The fan means observation, the scroll means judgment, the board means punishment. You never want to see the board. Though they hold no formal military rank, the eunuchs rule the palace more completely than any soldier ever could. Their power is unofficial but absolute. They control movement, access, meals, schedules, rumours. They determine who sees whom and when, and for how long. They can make you wait 3 days for new undergarments, or withhold your bath until your skin begins to itch with sweat and shame. No one questions their decisions. No one asks where the dismissed boys go. At first you try to stay out of their way, eyes lowered, posture perfect, words clipped and careful, but that too can draw attention. They don't trust deference any more than arrogance. What they want, you begin to realise, is predictability. Not virtue, not intelligence, just obedience, steady, practiced, unblinking. You learn to pause before you answer. You learn to answer as if you already know the correct opinion. You become fluent in neutrality. Some of the eunuchs have favourite targets. One boy from your wing, narrow-faced with a soft voice and a habit of quoting poetry, catches their attention early. He's too eager, too graceful, too visible. He's sent for retraining twice in a single month. When he returns, his hair has been cut again, close to the scalp. His wrists are raw. He no longer recites anything. He stares ahead when spoken to. One night, you catch him biting down on his knuckles so hard, it leaves a crescent mark that doesn't fade by morning. You hear stories, not whispered rumours, but careful statements delivered with the tone of fact. That one boy had his tongue notched for speaking out of turn, that another was made to kneel in the snow until his knees blistered, that someone was stripped of his name again, sent back to the status of unassigned until further notice. None of these punishments are witnessed. That's part of the lesson. Consequences happen out of sight, but they linger in the eyes of those who return. You see the board once, just once. A short, heavy-set eunuch with a crooked spine carries it under one arm like a tray. He stops in the corridor outside the garden gates, where two boys are walking just a little too close together. Not touching, not whispering, just too near. A single name is written on the board in black ink. Nothing else, no explanation. The boy is escorted away. The other is left standing, frozen, unsure if he's been spared or simply deferred. You do not see either of them again. The eunuchs test you in subtle ways. They might ask an open-ended question during posture practice. What did the lotus blossoms remind you of this morning? Or they might hand you an extra dumpling at lunch to see whether you accept it without hesitation. Sometimes they drop a robe and watch who picks it up first. Sometimes they give you a compliment just to observe your reaction. The lesson is always the same. Don't reveal too much. Even gratitude can mark you as weak. You begin to understand that kindness is a currency with teeth. A eunuch might smile at you one day, correct your collar gently, even address you by your full new name. And then 2 days later, he passes you in the corridor without a glance. You've failed some test, you just don't know which one. You learn not to depend on the warmth of a gesture. It doesn't mean what you want it to mean. It never does. They watch everything. They watch how you walk, how you enter a room, how long it takes you to bow. They watch how you respond to others' missteps. If someone stumbles and you reach out a hand, that's noted. If you laugh at someone's mistake, that's noted too. You're always being scored, even if no one says so. One of the boys in your dormitory claims he found a chart once, a real one, hidden in a supply room, listing names with tallies and notes beside each. He was caught reading it. That night, a blanket was draped over his bed, and in the morning, his belongings were gone. Once, in the courtyard during garden duty, you make the mistake of speaking without being addressed. Just a single comment, harmless, even helpful, about the order of the watering. A eunuch standing nearby doesn't say a word, but he turns his head slightly. That's all. The next day, your breakfast arrives cold. The following day, your robe is replaced with one a size too small. The day after that, you're passed over during grooming rounds. A pattern begins to form, and you recognize it for what it is, a correction. You do not speak again unless spoken to. Sometimes the punishments are more theatrical. Not often, but enough to remind everyone. One evening, a boy is brought to the centre of the training hall and made to kneel, while an instructor reads a list of his failures, failing to maintain posture, glancing too long at a visiting dignitary, leaving his sandals too close to the sleeping mat. The list is long. At the end, he's told to thank the palace for its mercy. He does. His voice does not tremble. That, more than anything, seems to satisfy them. You wonder how much of this is necessary and how much is performance, whether the eunuchs punish because they must, or because they can. You try not to think about it too much, but sometimes, late at night, when the corridors creak and you catch the scent of unfamiliar oil burning nearby, you imagine what it must feel like to have that kind of power. Power with no name. Power that answers only to itself. One of the instructors is different. He never smiles, never frowns, never raises his voice. But you notice that when he corrects someone, it's always effective. He doesn't humiliate. He doesn't dismiss. He simply states what was wrong and how it should be done next time. You begin to watch him closely, mimic his stillness, his cadence, the way he folds his hands. He seems untouchable, untouching. You don't know if that makes him safer or just more efficient. Eventually you stop waiting for praise. You stop looking for signals that you've done something right. The goal shifts from being approved to being unremarkable. Safe, forgettable. The boy who receives no notes. The one who doesn't appear on the board. The one who's never asked to explain himself. You become that boy. And then without quite realizing when it began, you start to flinch before you're touched. Not violently, not visibly, just a subtle tightening of the shoulders, a pause in the breath, a flicker of readiness, as if your body has begun to anticipate correction before the hand even lifts. The eunuchs notice. Of course they do. One nods faintly as he passes. You wonder if it means you've learned your lesson, or if he's just confirming you are worth breaking. When you're finally summoned, it feels less like a reward and more like being volunteered for sacrifice. The message arrives without fanfare, passed to your attendant on a folded strip of silk, with your name written in brushed vermilion. No one congratulates you. No one meets your eyes. You're told to prepare. Not what to wear, not what to say, just that you're expected in the flower pavilion before the third bell. You're given a fresh robe the colour of apricot skin, trimmed with silver thread at the collar, and instructed to wear your hair pulled back, but not pinned. The eunuch delivering the robe offers no explanation. He doesn't need to. The pavilion is near the central garden, past the koi pond with the chipped stone lanterns, and beneath a corridor lined with silk lanterns that never seem to flicker. You've walked past it before, always quickly, never looking too long. It is a place reserved for those who've been noticed, and being noticed is dangerous. There are stories about the pavilion. None of them end well. You try not to think about that as you step into your sandals and fold your hands the way you were taught, left over right, never reversed. The interior is dim, lit by candles sunk into carved lotus bowls that float in shallow basins of water. The air is thick with perfume, amber resin and powdered chrysanthemum, heavy enough to sting the back of your throat. Everything is designed to soften the world. The filtered light, the padded floors, the gauze curtains drifting like ghosts from every beam. A eunuch meets you just inside the door and signals for you to kneel. You do. He adjusts your robe silently, tucking a fold at your shoulder, smoothing a wrinkle at your hip. Then he leaves. You kneel alone for a long time. Not long enough to be forgotten, but long enough to sweat through the small of your back and begin to feel your knees ache beneath the lacquered floor mat. You count your breaths. You picture the instructions you've been given 100 times. How to address a superior without initiating eye contact. How to pour wine without spilling even a drop. How to sit in a way that suggests attentiveness without need. You feel your heartbeat in your throat. You do not swallow. The emperor does not enter first. Instead, a cluster of courtiers arrives, male and female, robed in deep jewel tones with jade clasps and gold thread slippers. They glance at you, not with curiosity, but with the casual boredom of people accustomed to beautiful things. You are not introduced. You are not asked your name. You are merely noted, like a vase or a fan, something placed in the room for atmosphere. And then he arrives. The emperor is younger than you expected. Not boyish, but not aged. His hair is thick and tied high, his robes layered and loose, the outermost trimmed in white crane feathers. His face is neither cruel nor kind. It is practiced, like yours. You lower your gaze as he passes, but feel the weight of his eyes when he stops near you. He says nothing. One of the courtiers laughs, another comments on the embroidery at your shoulder. The emperor's hand brushes your chin and tilts your face upward. You meet his gaze for half a breath, then lower it again. He makes a sound, approving, amused, or indifferent. You can't tell, and then sits. You are instructed to pour wine. You do, your hand steady despite the burn in your legs. The cup is porcelain, thinner than to eggshell, and you manage not to spill. This earns a nod from the eldest concubine present, a woman with oil-dark hair and fingernails like painted thorns. She does not smile, but she watches you the entire time, even when she leans close to whisper into the emperor's ear. You are not addressed again, but you remain, kneeling, poised, listening as the courtiers speak in vague riddles and honeyed insults. You are allowed to speak only when spoken to, and that happens exactly once, when one man asks whether your family was known for musicians or merchants. You respond modestly, as instructed. Neither. My family tended lotus ponds for the temple. It is a lie, but it pleases them. One woman laughs and says, "Then you were born in still water." You smile politely and say nothing more. At some point, someone places a silk fan in your hand. It is perfumed and warm from another's grip. You fan the emperor for exactly 4 beats before the eunuch behind him relieves you. You're dismissed with a wave, but not before the emperor flicks a glance in your direction. A glance that says nothing, confirms nothing, but ensures you will be remembered. And being remembered is its own trap. Back in your quarters, the robe is taken from you before you can sit down. A eunuch hands you a damp cloth to wipe the back of your neck. Though you're not permitted a bath, your attendant offers a bowl of broth, which you sip slowly, while replaying every movement from the pavilion. Did you kneel too quickly? Did you speak too softly? Did the emperor's silence mean satisfaction or disappointment? The other boys say nothing, but you feel the shift in their silence. Some avoid your gaze now. Others watch you too carefully, You are no longer invisible, and you're not alone. There are whispers about who has been summoned before, and who did not return a second time. You're not told what happens to those who fail to amuse or impress or submit properly. But you've seen empty beds cleared by morning. You've seen bowls left untouched at mealtime, and names that quietly vanish from ledgers. There are female concubines in the pavilion too. You saw them. Perfumed, poised, painted like porcelain. Some watched you with vague interest, one with a scowl she didn't bother to hide. You are not competition exactly, but you are not harmless either. You occupy a space that shouldn't exist, visible but undefined, desired but unacknowledged. You are not wife, not servant, not consort. You are a novelty, a problem, an ornament placed between two rival walls. You learn quickly that among the concubines, alliances are brief and brittle. A smile one day can turn into a snub the next. Compliments are barbed. Kindness has a cost. The older ones ignore you. The younger ones test you. Once, in passing, a girl remarks that your sash is knotted incorrectly. When you glance down to check, she brushes your arm and whispers, "Careful? Some things are watched more than others." You nod and retie the knot in silence. The eunuchs offer no advice, only glances, only schedules. You are summoned again 3 days later, not to the pavilion, but to a music chamber near the east wing, where the emperor sometimes listens to string instruments while reclining on painted cushions. This time, you are asked to recite a poem. You choose one you were made to memorize in your first month. Your voice is steady. Your hands are still. The emperor does not look at you while you speak, but he nods once, slowly, when you finish. You do not know if that is better or worse than laughter. It begins with a sideways glance at dinner, then a cough into a sleeve, then silence when you enter a room. At first, you assume nothing. People look, people cough, people grow quiet when others walk in. It's the natural ebb and flow of palace life, you tell yourself. But the feeling persists. You begin to notice it in patterns. A shared glance between two attendants just as you pass. A missing invitation to a poetry reading you would have attended a week earlier. A robe sent to you with the wrong sash colour, peach instead of silver. You correct it quickly, but not before catching the faintest smirk on the face of the boy delivering it. No one says anything directly. They never do. That's not how it works here. Words are too dangerous. Instead, the accusation takes shape in subtler forms. Someone leaves a handkerchief folded on your sleeping mat, embroidered with a character that could mean betrayal or accident, depending on how it's read. Someone else comments on your perfume. Too sweet, they say. Too forward. You hadn't changed it, not willingly. You wonder if someone else did. You try to track the source, but it's impossible. Whispers mutate as they travel, shedding facts and growing claws. You suspect one of the junior concubines, bright-eyed, ambitious, always eager to laugh too loudly when a senior makes a joke. You once corrected her posture during dance instruction. Maybe that was enough. Or maybe not. Maybe it was nothing you did. Maybe it was the way your name sounded beside the emperor's during a routine announcement. Too close, too recent, too easy to resent. The other concubines grow colder. A few still nod when you pass, but the warmth is gone. One begins reciting poems you once claimed as your favourites, loud enough for you to hear from across the courtyard. Another arranges to walk behind you during procession, close enough to be seen, far enough to avoid association. When you make a minor error during a tea ceremony, spilling a single drop onto the rim of the cup, no one helps you recover it. You are left kneeling, silently correcting yourself under the gaze of a visiting official who says nothing but raises a brow in clear disappointment. Then a girl falls ill, not dramatically, just a slow fade. Her eyes hollow, her appetite shrinks. She no longer attends rehearsals. Rumour says she spoke out of turn. Rumour says she asked a question about the emperor's preferences. Rumour says she smiled at the wrong moment. Rumour says it had something to do with you. You try to keep your routine perfect, every movement, every word, every bow. You measure your glances. You smile only when mirrored. You speak in the softest register, aloud. But that too can look suspicious. You begin to understand there is no safe middle. Be too present, and you're arrogant. Be too quiet, and you're hiding something. The walls begin to lean in slightly, as though testing the space you take up. One afternoon, you are summoned to assist in the selection of robes for an upcoming ceremony. It's an honour, on paper. In practice, it means walking into a room full of more senior concubines and pretending not to notice the tension crackling between every glance. The fabrics are arranged by season and virtue. Silk the colour of jade for purity, amber for devotion, ink black for humility. When your opinion is requested, you offer a polite, non-committal suggestion, perhaps the seafoam green for its subtlety. The eldest concubine smiles, then she says, "Subtlety doesn't suit everyone." The others laugh. You smile in return, you do not speak again. That evening, your duties are reassigned. You are no longer part of the escort for the garden procession. You are no longer permitted in the music room without written instruction. Your calligraphy brushes are replaced with older, frayed ones. You are not scolded, you are not accused, but things shift, and everyone can feel it. You try asking your attendant if he's noticed anything. He freezes, then bows and says he has an errand to complete. You do not ask again. Days blur into each other. The meals are the same. The lessons continue. The bells toll with mechanical precision. But something in you bends. You walk more slowly. You sleep more lightly. You begin to observe yourself as if from a distance, trying to pinpoint what went wrong. You revise your own story, trimming away details that might have drawn attention. You stop wearing the robe with silver threading. You decline an invitation to recite poetry for a visiting scribe. You train your eyes to settle on the floor rather than on people's faces. Then the question comes. It arrives as all things do here, with silence first, a morning without breakfast, a robe delivered late, then a summons, not to the pavilion, not to the rehearsal hall, but to the administrative wing. You've never been there before. It smells of rice glue and ink, not perfume. The corridors are bare, no murals, no cushions, just scrolls stacked behind latticed screens and floor mats pressed thin from use. You are told to kneel. You do. The head eunuch arrives without escort. He's older than you expected, his spine slightly stooped, his hairline receding, his eyes sharp as the tip of a needle. He does not sit. He circles you slowly, hands folded behind his back, pausing once to adjust the sleeve of your robe, with a pinch too firm to be gentle. "You've been spoken of," he says quietly. Not as a question, as a diagnosis. You keep your head bowed. "I didn't mean..." He cuts you off with a small tight sound, not a word, just a breath with edges. "There are stories," he continues, his voice still calm. "Nothing formal, of course, but stories are more dangerous than orders. They move faster. You want to deny them. You want to say you don't know who started them, that they aren't true, that you have done everything asked of you, but you don't. Because you've already learned the other rule, the important one. He already knows the answer he wants. Your reply just determines the punishment. You give the answer you think will do the least damage, soft, incomplete, apologetic without admitting to anything specific. The head eunuch listens without nodding, without blinking, and when you finish, he simply turns and leaves the room. No verdict, no punishment, just absence. That night, nothing changes, no one comes, no orders are posted, and in the days that follow, your life continues exactly as before, except it doesn't. Not really. That night, a eunuch brings you to new quarters, a side room down a quieter hall, once used for a clerk or messenger. You are told it's temporary, though no one ever says when it might end. Your summons grow infrequent, your servants are reassigned, your perfume runs out, and no one replaces it. It happens slowly, so slowly that at first you convince yourself it's temporary. A passing mood, a minor reordering of the court's attention. You aren't banished, you aren't scolded, no accusations are repeated, you simply wait. Each morning you rise and perform your rituals as usual, washing, dressing, reciting the prescribed verses before tea, but the knock that used to come at the door never arrives. The scrolls remain sealed, the fan stays folded. You light the incense yourself now. At first your body is grateful, the tension in your shoulders fades slightly, you sleep longer, your hands stop trembling when you lift a teacup. But beneath that stillness, something else begins to rot. Not in your limbs, but in your mind. The silence stretches, the hours lengthen, the palace still hums around you, but you're no longer invited to hum with it. You walk past gardens freshly trimmed, hear the faint clink of laughter in the pavilion, and know instinctively that none of it is for you. Your robe is replaced with a plainer one, same cut, but the thread at the collar is duller, the lining thinner. You say nothing. It would be undignified to ask. One of your attendants, an older boy who used to adjust your sash in silence, stops appearing at all. You're assigned a new one, younger, with a nervous gait and downcast eyes. He does not make conversation. He doesn't need to. The message is clear. You're no longer worth the time of someone experienced. The concubines who once smiled at you in passing now look through you, not with malice but with disinterest, as if you've become furniture, a decorative screen, slightly faded, still functional but unremarkable. You pass them in the courtyard and receive no nod, no whisper, no pause. You hear your name less and less, even in gossip. You used to be talked about, judged, envied. Now you're not even mentioned. It's not cruelty, it's something colder. Even the eunuchs shift around you. Once they corrected your posture with a gentle hand or a flick of the wrist. Now they let you slouch. They let your sleeves fall unevenly. No notes, no punishments, no attention. One morning you leave your slippers a half step out of alignment. No one comments. You try it again the next day, intentionally letting your bow linger too long. Still nothing. The discipline you spent months perfecting is no longer required, because no one is watching. You begin to eat less, though no one tells you to. Your appetite wanes with your visibility. Meals are delivered without ceremony. Congee, over-steamed greens, a slice of melon bruised at the edge. Sometimes the tray arrives late, sometimes not at all. You don't complain. You don't want to give anyone a reason to remember your existence, even if it's only to erase it more thoroughly. You've learned by now that fading quietly is safer than struggling. Your quarters begin to decay. It's subtle at first, a loose floorboard, a hinge that squeaks when the door is opened too wide. Then mildew appears on the edge of the tapestry, hanging near your bed. You report it to your attendant. He bows, nods, and does nothing. Days pass. The smell grows stronger, damp and bitter, like old tea left in the sun. You learn to breathe through it. It's easier than asking again. The bronze mirror on your wall loses its shine. You try to polish it, but the tarnish won't lift. Your reflection becomes a smudge, vague, flickering, unfamiliar. You stare into it each evening and try to recall the face the emperor once tilted upward with 2 fingers. You can't. All you see now is a shadow with your posture, wearing your robe. You stop looking after a while. There's no reason to check what no one else will ever see. Once, on your way back from the garden path, now limited to 10 minutes, unsupervised, you hear laughter from inside the music chamber. A high, breathless giggle, followed by a deep murmur. You recognize the cadence, if not the words. You slow your steps just for a moment, but keep walking. You know who is laughing, you know why, and you know better than to be caught listening. You try to stay useful. You volunteer for minor tasks, helping fold linens, sweeping the corridor outside your room, organising scrolls in the practice hall. These are duties for novices, but they are also safe. Menial work means someone sees you without needing to notice you. You become part of the palace machinery, oiled and silent. And still, your name fades. You begin to hear it less in your own head. The head instructor no longer calls on you during rehearsals. Your hands, once softened with balm and scented oil, are dry now, the cuticles frayed from nervous picking. You wrap them in cloth when you sleep, out of habit more than vanity. The threads come loose at night. You don't bother tying them again. There is no announcement, no final verdict, just the slow evaporation of purpose. You wake one morning and realise you haven't been summoned in a month. The candle in your chamber burns lower than usual. The wax spills across the base and hardens crooked. No one replaces it. You trim the wick yourself and light it again. The flame sputters. You speak less. You think in fragments. You forget the last poem you memorised. You forget which season you arrived. You no longer remember the name of the boy who used to sleep 2 beds down from yours. He left during a rainstorm. Or maybe before. You can't picture his face. One afternoon, you pass by the reflection pool on your way to deliver a folded robe to a chambermaid. The surface is still. You catch a glimpse of yourself, distorted by the ripples left by a falling leaf. You pause, startled. Your robe looks duller than you thought. Your posture bent. You straighten instinctively, but the image doesn't improve. You are not who you were. You are not who they selected. You are not who they erased. You are what remains. Later that evening, your attendant forgets your evening tea. When he arrives an hour late, he mumbles something about confusion with the rosters. You don't press. You accept the cup, drink it cool, and set it aside without comment. You know there is no confusion. There is no roster. Not for you. Not anymore. No one tells you to leave. No one says your service is ended. You still sleep in your chamber. You still wear your robe. You still wake with the incense in your lungs. But it's thinner now. The smoke doesn't cling the way it used to. The scent has changed. You wonder if the mixture was adjusted, or if your body has stopped recognizing it. You still bow when you pass through doorways. You still speak the appropriate phrases when addressed. You still fold your hands and smile faintly, but there is no one on the other side of that performance. You are a ghost pantomiming life inside walls that have already absorbed your silence. You're not dismissed, you're forgotten on purpose, and for a time that seems to be the end of your story. You move through the palace like fog on a pond, thin and unbothered, never thick enough to notice, never solid enough to resist. You expect your days will stretch like this forever, grey, featureless, uneventful. But the palace is not a still place, even when it pretends to be. It starts with whispers, they always do. This time, they come faster, harsher, carried in hurried footsteps and wide-eyed glances, the kind that dart away when you catch them. A concubine from the inner wing is found lying faint beside the eastern corridor, blood soaking the hem of her robe. She is not high-ranked, not particularly noticed before. But now every eye is on her, or more accurately, on what might be inside her. A physician is summoned, curtains are drawn, the eunuchs lock the door behind them. No one says the word aloud, they don't have to. Everyone understands. The timing, the stains, the silence. It is either a miscarriage or an attempt to end something before it begins. Both are offences, both are dangerous. Especially when the father is unknown, or worse, known, but inconvenient. You wouldn't have thought twice about it, except your name is spoken. Not to your face, not in open accusation, but in a way that curls around corners, slipping between paper screens and silk curtains like smoke from an unattended flame. First in passing, then in speculation, and soon in the form of a question no one asks directly, but everyone wants answered. Were you involved? At first the idea seems absurd, logistically impossible. You haven't spoken to the girl. You You haven't shared breath with her, let alone space. She once passed you a tray of tea during a group audience months ago. That's it. You can't imagine how anyone could take that and twist it into implication. But the palace doesn't need logic to believe something. It just needs timing, suggestion, and a convenient scapegoat. And you, long out of favour, long left unprotected, are convenient. No one asks for your account. No one questions you. But your name begins appearing again, in the wrong mouths, for the wrong reasons. The eunuchs look at you longer than usual now, but say nothing. The other concubines resume watching you from behind fans. One of them crosses herself in the old way when you pass. Another steps slightly to the side in the corridor, not out of respect, but caution. The accusations never become official. Perhaps they can't. Perhaps they're too implausible to write down. You are, after all, male. The very notion is unthinkable. But the palace has a long history of unthinkable things. And in a place where no one believes the truth and everyone rewards discretion, rumours are rarely about what's possible. They are about what is useful. You consider protesting, but to whom? The head eunuch, who already measured you once and found you lacking? The emperor, who hasn't spoken your name in weeks? The girl herself has vanished, taken to a medical wing or a punishment chamber, or some distant, empty room that doesn't echo. You don't know what she told them. You don't know if she even had the chance. She might have said nothing at all. She might have been silenced before the question was ever asked. Your quarters are searched one morning without warning. You wake to find 2 eunuchs standing in your doorway, hands clasped neatly in front of them. They don't explain. They don't need to. They comb through your bedding, your lacquer box, the loose tiles beneath your wash basin. They take nothing. They find nothing. But that was never the point. The search is its own performance, and you are the audience. Afterward, your attendant avoids your gaze. When he brushes your robe that evening, his hands shake. You dismiss him early and finish the task yourself. No punishment is handed down. No formal statement is made, but the shift is complete. The absence of favour has hardened into something else, something more like contamination. You are no longer just irrelevant. You are suspect, not in the criminal sense, but in the social one. A hairline crack in a porcelain cup, a stain on silk no one can scrub away, so they pretend it isn't there, while storing you deeper in the drawer. You begin to wonder if this was deliberate, if someone fed the story into the right ears. A passing comment, a strategically placed handkerchief, a whispered, "I heard," followed by, "but it's probably nothing." That's all it would take. A concubine with ambition, a eunuch with a debt, a physician with a grudge. The court moves on favours, and favours move on leverage. And you, once useful, now discarded, make an easy stepping stone. But you can't prove anything. So you say nothing. You're not forbidden to attend meals, but you do so rarely. When you do, you sit at the end of the hall, facing no one, chewing slowly, while conversation skims over you like wind over stone. You're not included. You're not excluded. You're simply present, like a crack in the ceiling no one dares repair, for fear of discovering what's behind it. The girl's name is never spoken again, not by anyone. Her quarters are reassigned within the week. The floor where she collapsed is scrubbed with vinegar and prayer ash. You walk past it often now, sometimes without realizing where your feet are taking you. The blood is gone, but the memory clings. You remember the smell, sharp, metallic, human. You consider asking the youngest concubine, quiet, observant, sometimes kind, if she knows what really happened. But you stop yourself. If she knows, she can't say. And if she doesn't, she's safer that way. You've learned enough by now to stop pulling at threads. The tapestry holds together best when no one looks too closely. Days pass, then weeks. The air grows warmer, the lanterns flicker longer before they're extinguished. Another boy is summoned to the pavilion. You recognize his face, barely out of training, lips too red, hands too soft. He doesn't look at you as he leaves, but you can see the excitement in the way he straightens his collar. You remember that feeling. It feels like it belonged to someone else. You dream that night of holding a child, not yours, not hers, just a child, small, faceless, warm. When you wake, your arms are curled around nothing. You lie still for a long time, listening to the corridor, the night birds, the soft click of sandals 2 rooms over. You think of the girl, of the blood, of the way your name was whispered before hers. She was taken away. You were left untouched, but stained forever. After that, you go to temple more often. Not because anyone tells you to, but because it's one of the few places you can sit in silence without being accused of anything. The temple is nestled within the southern garden, small and walled, half hidden behind a screen of bamboo and flowering magnolia. It is quiet, even when full. The floor is always swept, the cushions always arranged in even rows. The offering bowls are polished daily, even when no offerings come. You kneel before the temple altar, but your prayers vanish into silk curtains and polished jade. The statue before you is of Guan Yin, cast in bronze, one hand raised in blessing, the other resting on an open lotus. Her face is perfectly symmetrical, serene, impossible to read. Her gaze never wavers. You bow. You light incense. You recite the prescribed chants. You ask for mercy without specifying for what. You whisper apologies for things you're not even sure you did. You ask questions you don't expect answered. No one teaches you how to pray here. They assume you already know, or they don't care whether you do. You follow the patterns of the others, bowing when they bow, rising when they rise, folding your hands exactly as they do. The rhythm becomes familiar, comforting even, a script you can perform with your body when your thoughts are too tangled to speak aloud. You mouth the sutras, but don't understand half of what you're saying. The words aren't yours. The voice barely is. The head priest is an old man, with eyes like withered plums. He nods when he sees you, but never speaks. He moves slowly, robes rustling like dead leaves, his hands always tucked inside his sleeves. Sometimes he sits on the stone bench just outside the shrine, watching the wind move the magnolia branches. Once he offers you a candied plum from a dish beside the altar. You take it. It's sour. You nod in thanks. He nods back. Neither of you says a word. You start lighting incense for others, not just for yourself. 1 stick for the girl, 1 for the boy whose name you never knew, but who left his sandals behind when he vanished. 1 for the younger concubine who won't meet your eyes anymore. You burn the offering slowly, watching the smoke coil up into the rafters where it disappears against the black wood. You like the smell, cleaner than perfume, more honest than powdered skin. There are religious festivals, of course, great sweeping rituals full of colour and chanting and processions. But you are rarely invited to those now. You catch glimpses of them from the outer courtyard. Red banners, fluttering prayer flags, the slow beat of a temple drum. Once you see the emperor himself bow before the statue with a string of black pearls in one hand. The crowd watches him as if he's a god praying to another god. You do not join them. You remain in the small back temple, the one no one visits unless they need to disappear for an hour. You pray differently now, not for favour, not for elevation, not even for forgiveness. You pray for stillness, for breath, for the slow passing of hours without more loss. Some days, you pray not to be remembered. Others, you pray for the exact opposite. Neither prayer seems to make a difference. You think often about karma, about past lives, about debts. It's a popular idea among the servants that suffering here means wealth in the next world. That pain is purifying. That humiliation is divine balance. You try to believe it. But part of you suspects that maybe this isn't penance. Maybe it's design. A machine built to erase certain people in ways that feel sacred, so no one questions the pattern. You remember a monk who visited your village once. He came through during Ghost Month, handing out paper charms and rice cakes. He said something your mother repeated often, that fate was a net, not a sword, that it catches everyone eventually. You wonder if this is what being caught feels like? Not death, not disaster, just the slow, quiet shrinking of your world until it becomes a hallway, a room, a breath. You keep going to temple because it's the only place where your silence feels appropriate instead of incriminating. Here, silence is part of the ritual. Here, silence is devotion, or at least a substitute for it. One evening, as you kneel before the statue, the candle beside the altar gutters out. No wind, no sound. Just a soft flicker, and then darkness. You do not relight it. You sit still, listening to the faint creak of the roof beams, the distant flap of a prayer flag in the courtyard. The incense burns down to ash beside you. You stay until the next bell rings. The next morning, your robe smells of smoke. No one comments. You keep wearing it. Others begin to notice your visits. You catch a glance from a concubine on the temple path. Her gaze curious but unreadable. A eunuch lingers longer than usual after delivering new incense sticks. The old priest nods when he sees you, but now does so without the faint lift of recognition he used to offer. You wonder if even here in the last corner of the palace, where you thought you could vanish, your presence is still being weighed. You no longer know what you expect from the gods. They've given no signs, no changes, no protection. They haven't punished you, not directly, but they haven't shielded you either. You wonder if they're like the Emperor, powerful, adorned, unreachable, too distant to notice who they harm by omission. You wonder if prayers rot the same way fabric does when it's stored in damp air and never touched again. You remember asking once if this was karma. Now you wonder if karma requires intent. If this is divine punishment, it's a quiet one. No wrath, no thunder, just endurance stretched thin over time until it stops resembling anything human. You begin to fear not divine punishment, but divine indifference. So when the cough begins in winter, you tell yourself it's nothing, just dryness from incense, or the change in weather, or the quiet mould that's begun to spread beneath the edge of your sleeping mat. At first it's barely more than a tickle, easily disguised behind a sleeve or a bowed head. No one notices, or if they do, they pretend not to. You follow their lead. You drink more tea. You hum softly to soothe your throat. You pray half-heartedly in the same breath you use to clear it. But the cough does not leave. It lingers through New Year's ceremonies you're no longer invited to attend, through the quiet burn of early spring incense, through the first blossoms opening on the plum trees outside the west-facing corridor. Your chest tightens at night and your ribs begin to ache. You sleep sitting up when you can, curled forward with your robe pulled tight across your knees. The phlegm thickens. Sometimes it's streaked faintly with red. You spit it into cloth and tuck the cloth away beneath your bed. You don't mention it. You've learned better than to draw attention to your needs. There is no physician assigned to your wing anymore, not officially. You haven't seen the apothecary eunuch since before the girl disappeared. Your attendant, the new one, timid, forgettable, asks once if you'd like to send a request for a ginger tea. You nod. It never comes. The request may have been lost, or ignored, or never written at all. Your appetite fades. Meals arrive late and half cold, rice clumped together in a porcelain bowl with a hairline crack near the rim. The tea is bitter. The fruit is overripe or underripe, never balanced. You eat what you can, but most of it ends up uneaten, pushed to the edge of the tray. Eventually, the portions shrink. One night, only congee arrives, watery and lukewarm, with nothing to season it. You stare at it for a long time before lifting the spoon. The walls of your chamber sweat at night now. Condensation from the shift in temperature gathers along the corners, and seeps down the edges of the painted screens. You can see where the lacquer is beginning to peel, revealing the pale wood beneath. The crane motif above your bed has faded to the colour of old bone. One of the silk cushions near the window has begun to unravel, the threads loose and tangled, like hair left in water. You try not to look at it. Your mirror is no help. The bronze is too tarnished now to reflect anything clearly. When you try to check your eyes or mouth, all you see is a warped outline, as if someone half remembered your face and sketched it in water. You haven't seen your full reflection in weeks. You're not sure you'd recognise it if you did. Your skin feels waxy. Your lips crack in the corners when you speak. You bleed slightly when you smile. You try not to cough in public. When you do walk the corridors, briefly, slowly, hunched like an old man, you keep a cloth tucked inside your sleeve. You press it to your lips when the spasms come and hold your breath until the fit passes. No one comments, but no one walks close to you anymore, either. Servants take a half step back when handing you trays. The few concubines who still nod in passing begin turning away before your shadow reaches them. The garden is closed to you now, not officially, just practically. You no longer receive permission to walk. When you ask, your attendant bows and says the schedule is full. Another day, perhaps. You nod. Another day never comes. Once you try to light your own incense. You fumble with the taper, your hands shaking too much to keep the flame steady. It burns unevenly, filling the room with smoke that clings to the damp air. You cough until your eyes water, until the corners of the painted screens blur. You don't try again. You wonder briefly if you're dying. But then you remember that dying in the palace isn't a moment. It's a process, a long unravelling, a disassembly, like a scroll being unrolled too far until the parchment tears. You haven't been given a physician, or a prayer, or a final bed. You're not important enough to be dying. You're just unwell, unattended, unwelcome. Even your bedding has changed. The blanket is thinner, the inner lining scratchier. The scent of lavender sachets that once hung above your pillow has long since faded, replaced by the sour tinge of sweat and something slightly metallic. You change the sheets yourself now, or you don't. Sometimes you leave them. You pretend you're saving strength, but really, it's because no one will notice either way. You try to remember what season it is. The windows are clouded from condensation most mornings, and the bells you once used to track time no longer seem to follow a schedule you understand. You used to rise with purpose. Now you wake from shallow dreams, unsure if it's dawn or dusk. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. Your breath rattles quietly in the quietest part of the night. Once a letter arrives, not addressed, just folded and left beneath your tea tray. Inside is a prayer verse, neatly copied, with no signature. You read it twice slowly and wonder who sent it. A kindness, a warning, a goodbye. You fold it again and place it beneath your sleeping mat, though you never pray it aloud. You hear things now. At least you think you do. A faint knock that vanishes when you answer it. A voice in the courtyard repeating your name. The sound of a bell tolling once, then not again. You try not to trust your senses anymore. They've started turning inward, echoing against themselves. You haven't been touched in weeks. You realise this one evening while undressing, slowly, gingerly, each movement deliberate so as not to provoke another coughing fit. You pause with your robe halfway off, hand on the sash, and think. No one has adjusted your collar. No one has helped you rise from kneeling. No one has brushed your hair. The last contact you can remember was a brush of fingers, as someone handed you a tray, and even that you're not sure wasn't imagined. By the time the new concubine arrives, you no longer expect change. You've grown used to the dull repetition of your days, the sound of your own coughing, the stale scent of incense, the scratch of fabric against your skin. So when the announcement is made, you barely look up. Another addition to the household. Another ornament for the Emperor's collection. You've seen it before, but this one is different. Not because of who he is, but because of how closely he resembles what you used to be. His robe is cut in the same style yours once was, high at the collar, with plum blossom embroidery along the sleeves. His hair is arranged in the same loose knot, glossy with oil. He is young, fresh-faced, soft-voiced. He walks like someone who still believes there's something to walk toward. You see him once, crossing the inner courtyard in the company of 2 eunuchs. He glances your way, but doesn't recognize you for what you are. Why would he? You wear the old uniform now, muted, unfitted, washed too many times to hold its shape. Your hair is unstyled, your gait careful. You don't speak, you don't smile. You might as well be a servant or a ghost. Within days his name spreads. Not loudly, but with momentum. A eunuch praises his reading voice. A concubine mentions his elegance. You hear of him being summoned to recite poems, then to pour wine, then to accompany the emperor during a scroll viewing. The path is familiar, the pattern unchanged. You remember each step because you once took them, and now you watch someone else follow them while your own footprints are scrubbed from the floor. Your cough quiets, but your body remains weak. You tire easily. You speak rarely. The days pass like diluted ink, thin and grey and slow to dry. No one visits your quarters. Your meals continue, but the portions shrink further. Once the rice arrives with no side dish, another time with no rice at all. Your robe frays at the hem. You consider mending it, then don't. You doubt anyone would notice the difference. And then quietly, your duties vanish. You're no longer summoned to assist with folding ceremony robes. You're no longer invited to prayer rituals, even the ones no one enjoys. When you attempt to report for calligraphy review, the instructor glances at his list, then at you, and says, "You're not on the roster." You try to explain that you've always been assigned here. He nods absently and turns away. No confrontation, no reprimand, just absence. You begin to notice other absences. The cushions once kept outside your room, gone. The incense bowl replaced with a smaller one. Your name no longer appears on the posted schedules in the servants' hall. At first you think it's an error, then you realise it isn't. It's precision, quiet, deliberate removal. You haven't been dismissed, you've simply been overwritten. You visit the registry hall in secret. It's not forbidden exactly, but few go unless summoned. The room smells of parchment and pine resin, cold and dry, lit by 2 narrow windows and a single hanging lantern. A young eunuch sits behind a lacquered desk, copying names from one scroll to another with the tip of a wolf hair brush. He doesn't look up when you enter. You wait. Then you ask softly whether your name is still listed. He scans the open scroll, tilts his head, and shakes it once. "That record's closed," he says. "Reassigned." You don't ask where. You thank him and leave. The weight of it settles in stages. You try to say your name aloud in your chamber, just once, but the word sticks. It feels foreign, like something you read years ago in a poem you only half understood. You try to recall the last time someone addressed you with it. You can't. Even your attendant calls you nothing now. He knocks, sets the tray down, bows and leaves. No titles, no greetings, just motion. You pass people in the halls who no longer recognise you. One concubine steps around you, as if you were furniture left in the wrong place. A eunuch you once served tea to 3 times in 1 week walks by without blinking. A novice bows to you by mistake, then flushes with embarrassment when he realises. You lower your eyes, you keep walking. Your reflection in the bronze mirror confirms what you already know. You are changing, not in the way the young concubine is being polished, but in the way something tarnishes when left untouched. Your skin is dull, your jaw softer, your eyes tired. You see no version of your former self here, only residue, only the ghost of decoration. Once, during a storm, you find yourself standing in the central corridor, watching the rain lash against the carved eaves. You used to love this sound, the hush of water, the muffled footsteps on soaked stone. Now it fills you with a strange sense of vertigo. You feel unmoored, detached. The palace around you is still spinning, still shining, still performing, but you are no longer on stage. You speak less each day, not out of discipline, but because there is no one left to speak to. Your thoughts come slower. You forget words, you pause mid-sentence even in your mind. You begin to wonder if you're disappearing only to others or to yourself as well. One morning you wake and find your bedding has been changed. Not by your request, not by your attendant, who doesn't make eye contact anymore. You don't know who did it. The colours are unfamiliar, the fabric thinner, the embroidery simpler. A small note is tucked under the pillow. Not a message, just a line of poetry written in careful brushstrokes. The peach tree sheds its petals, even when no one watches. You don't know what it means. You fold the paper and place it beneath your mat. That afternoon, you visit the temple. No one stops you. No one sees you. You light incense for yourself, for the girl, for the new concubine whose name is already being practiced in the emperor's private halls. You do not ask for favour. You do not ask for death. You ask for clarity. The smoke rises. The statue watches. Nothing changes. When roll call happens the next day, you attend out of habit. You stand at the back, posture correct, hands folded. The list is read in the same steady rhythm it always is. Your name does not come. No one glances at you. The room empties. You remain standing. Then you leave, not because anyone asks you to, but because you understand your part is over. The next morning, the door to your quarters is locked from the outside. There is no explanation. You try the handle before dawn, just to check. It does not move. At first you assume there's been a mistake. A misplaced roster, a forgotten change of quarters. You sit by the door for a time, listening for the familiar rattle of the food cart, the patter of sandals, the low murmur of servants exchanging trays. But they don't come. Midday passes, then evening. You stay where you are. The next morning no breakfast arrives. You tap lightly on the door. Once, twice. The sound echoes dully against the hallway. No one responds. You call out, not loudly, just enough to be heard by someone nearby, if anyone is. There is no answer. You knock again, harder this time. Still nothing. The palace does not raise its voice, and it does not respond to yours. The door remains locked. You inventory what you have left. Half a pot of cold tea, one overripe plum, a handful of rice stored dry in a porcelain bowl near the stove. You eat sparingly. That night, you try to sleep, but your body aches too sharply from the cold. The floor feels harder than usual, the mat thinner. You wrap yourself tighter in your robe and listen to your own breath rasp against the stillness. On the second day, the water stops coming. You stare at the empty jug for a long time, wondering if someone will remember, but you already know the answer. If your name isn't on the roster, then your rations aren't either. Food and water follow the ink, not the body. You are no longer scheduled to exist, your lips crack. Your hands tremble when you reach for the jug again, just to check. Still empty, still sealed. The painted pattern on the side has started to chip. You run your thumb along it, slowly, trying to remember how long it's been in the room with you. You can't. You have no idea how many days have passed. You lie down early, not out of fatigue, but to preserve what strength you can. The ache in your stomach sharpens, then dulls. You feel light and heavy at the same time. Your thoughts unravel slowly, curling in on themselves. You stop knocking. You stop calling. You begin to understand that this is not a delay. This is the process. The room doesn't change. The screens still hang where they always have. The wall scrolls are still faded with moisture. The corner where the incense once burned still smells faintly of sandalwood and smoke. Everything remains in place except you. You begin to feel like furniture, old, worn, set aside. You are not punished. You are not scolded. You are simply not needed. On the third day, you wake with a nosebleed. It crusts at your lip. You wipe it away with the sleeve of your robe. The robe smells of mildew now. The collar is stiff with salt from your skin. You do not bother changing it. You sleep more often now. You drift in and out. Time folds strangely, light and shadow blending together into long stretches of grey. You have dreams, quiet ones, blurred and distant. You see trees without names, rivers with no bridges. You hear footsteps outside your door, but when you sit up, there's only silence. At one point, you think you hear the lock click. You crawl to the door. You press your ear against it. Nothing. You wait there for a long time before crawling back to your mat. You do not try again. You wonder if anyone has checked the room, if a eunuch passed by with a clipboard and paused outside, hesitating, if a servant noticed your tray was still there, untouched. But the system runs too smoothly for pauses. The palace hums forward. Names are recited, duties assigned. Your absence has already been filled. Your ledger line is blank. You lose track of your own body, the weight of your limbs, the shape of your breath. The throb in your head blurs into the tightness in your chest, the ache in your joints, the numbness in your feet. You lie still most of the time, conserving effort. There is no point in pacing. The space is too small to wear a path, and you are too weak to walk it. One night, you wake to the sound of thunder in the distance. You open your eyes and see lightning flash. You think of the outer gardens, of rain on the stone tiles, of the new concubine with the clear voice and embroidered sleeves. You wonder if he has ever seen a storm from the pavilion, if he watched it the way you used to, with awe, not fear. Your tongue is thick, your throat raw. You whisper something, maybe a prayer, maybe your name, but your voice is too hoarse to carry. The sound dies against the walls. No one comes. Eventually, you do not wake. The door is opened again for the first time in days. No servant cries, no eunuch sighs, no bell tolls, no funeral is held. The bedding is changed. The room is swept. A new concubine, perhaps, will be placed there. Or perhaps it will be reassigned to storage. No record is amended because none remains. History will not say your name. That was the whole point. Your role was never meant to ripple outward, never meant to inspire poetry or rebellion or even a wistful anecdote told over tea. You were not the favourite, not the scandal, not the tragedy. You were a placeholder in silk, a breath in the drapery of the palace, a warm body placed precisely where someone wanted it, and removed just as precisely when they didn't. The records are quiet on such details. The archives name the ministers and generals, the sons and concubines who bore heirs or ruined fortunes. But the ones like you, the ornaments, the adornments, the perfumed distractions who gave no child and caused no stir, fade from ink long before they fade from life. No one wrote down the exact date your duties ceased. No one recorded who brought your meals before they stopped arriving, or which eunuch last knocked on your door, or which whisper first decided you were no longer required. Your absence did not trouble the bureaucracy. The ledgers simply adjusted. The roles narrowed. Rooms were reassigned. Robes laundered and reused. Somewhere, a servant scrubbed the floor where you once knelt, humming to herself, unaware that you had ever been there. The rhythm of the palace continued without hesitation, like a great drum whose tempo never slows for a single snapped string. You were unremembered deliberately, not maliciously, forgotten with the same precision you were once chosen. It is a kind of perfection, in a way, cleaner than scandal, softer than disgrace. You gave no offence and so required no consequence. You simply ceased, exactly as designed. Just another peony, too faded to display, petals curled in quiet, private dust. There were moments, perhaps, when you thought it might be otherwise, when you were still young enough to imagine that obedience earned favour, that grace and beauty could write their own safety. that if you knelt at the right angle or poured wine with just the right tilt of your wrist, someone might see you as more than decoration. But that was never the design. You were trained to smile without joy, speak without truth, exist without permanence. The system did not fail you. It worked exactly as intended. There is no funeral for someone who vanishes like this. No offerings, no mourning robes, no whispered prayers in the kitchens. If your name is ever spoken again, it will be by mistake. If someone remembers your face, they will confuse it with another's. You were never unique, only uniform, only sufficient, and that was enough, until it wasn't. Outside, the world continues to spin beneath skies untroubled by your absence. Emperors die, dynasties fracture, scholars debate the dates of floods and treaties and reforms, but not of you. You are not even a footnote in their scrolls. You are a shadow that never stuck to the wall, a pressed robe that was never worn again. You left no heir. You broke no rule. You whispered nothing worth recording. And so the silence holds, and yet it is complete. You were not meant to endure. You were meant to soften the edge of a ruler's boredom, to reflect his light like lacquerware in a darkened room. You did that. For a while. Then you did what you were created to do. You vanished. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. A life chosen for beauty, trained for silence, and erased without ceremony. A figure sculpted to please, then discarded so gently the world forgot to notice. If you'd like early access to more quietly devastating histories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten lives and overlooked tragedies you'd like to see explored. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Amanda Lamke, and Rich Davis. Sleep well.